Number 1. First, let me give you some background. In my late teens and early 20s, I used to go to China every summer to volunteer as an English tutor. That's how I got my current username. It was a great experience most of the time, and I made a lot of friends and was really challenged to grow into a more mature, responsible individual. I generally went wherever the agency found space for me, so I ended up seeing a lot of different cities and towns in China. My last 2 summers were in a coastal city in the deep south. This city had always been a major port with a massive international trading community. Along with Beijing and Shanghai, it's one of the most important economic centers of the mainland's east coast. As a result, a lot of foreigners come through and stay on business. Even so, most foreigners stick to a few neighborhoods. So if you're a foreigner outside one of those neighborhoods, you'll stick out like a sore thumb. That said, my agency placed me with a primary school in one of the less cosmopolitan, but still relatively nice suburbs, which was fine by me. I was used to working in really rural situations, so being so close to a bustling major city was a nice change of pace. Even so, as the weeks went by, I began to notice something was a little off. I'm a pretty stereotypical white American woman, and even in as big as a place as this city, I was pretty easy to spot, especially since I seemed to have inherited my Irish ancestors' deathly pale, untannable skin. To give you a better idea, I'm fairly short, and without makeup. I never wore makeup there, since humidity would make it run immediately. I tend to look a lot younger than I am. I was about 21 at the time and looked 16. I was used to working, as I said, in rather rural Chinese towns, where life is fairly quiet and peaceful, and other than people noticing how obviously foreign I was, most folks left me alone. As a result, in my first gig in this city, I was super relaxed. But then I started realizing that I was being noticed. Not so much by the locals, but definitely international businessmen who were visiting or staying. As the weeks progressed, I increasingly had to deal with them chatting me up, leering at me, and making loud comments about how nice it was to see a white woman. It got pretty creepy, but nothing ever seemed to come of it. I could generally handle myself and tell them where they could stick it if they got too fresh. That is until one night. One warm evening, I was in my fairly peaceful suburb's central shopping area. I met up with some local Chinese friends, and we all had dinner together and had a great time laughing it up. It was a late dinner, so it was already totally dark out by the time we finished up our meal and said goodbye. They went one way, back to their apartment, and I went to the other to return to my host family's apartment. Even though it was late, the brightly lit market street was bustling, everyone out enjoying the relative coolness of the evening after another stifling hot, humid day. I knew I'd be home alone. My host family had gone out to an event, so I stopped by a booth selling cheap DVDs. Figured I'd watch a movie while I waited for my host family to get home. That's when I felt a presence behind my right shoulder. I looked up from the stack of DVDs to see a man. Obviously, a foreign businessman. He had a shaved head, and one side of his face was horribly pockmarked or scarred. I'm not sure which. He was grinning at me, and his eyes were cold and predatory. I felt a shiver of fear go through me that I hadn't experienced before with anyone else in the city. "You're beautiful," he said in a deep voice. I don't know what to say, so I just stammered out, "Thanks. Do you want to go to a bar?" I shook my head. "No, I'm just going home. Thank you." "Can I have your number? Your email? I want to get to know you," he pressed. "You're so beautiful." "Sorry, no, I'm not interested," I said as firmly as I could, putting down the DVDs I'd been looking at, and I turned to go, walking as quickly as I could through the crowds towards my host family's apartment complex. I don't know what it is, but some kind of spider sense told me that I was not alone as I walked. After a minute or so, I glanced cautiously over my shoulder to, as I feared, see him only a few paces behind me. The turn-off street to my apartment complex was coming up. My heart pounding, I knew I couldn't go that way because the turn-off street was almost totally dark, with barely any streetlights. I also really didn't want this creep knowing where I, or my host family, lived. So I ducked into the very last shop before the turn-off and pretended to look at bottles of soda and ice cream bars. The shop, being a corner shop, had a large door on each outward-facing side. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him pass by the door I'd walked through, and then turn the corner to pass by the door on the other side, slowing his pace and lingering, his eyes on me. He slowed his pace and seemed to stop, just beside the opposite door, as if waiting in the shadows for me to emerge. I pretended to ignore him, going behind a stand of shelves and pulling out my phone. Hastily, I speed dialed my friends who I'd just had dinner with. "Please come meet me," I hissed into the phone. "There's a man. I think he's following me. I'll walk back towards you, and you walk towards me." Fear in their voices, they agreed. I hung up but kept my phone clutched tightly in my hand, slipping back out the same door I'd come in, and hoping he wouldn't see me. The market street was still busy and bright, so I was pretty certain the man wasn't going to try anything as long as I stayed on that street. Hastily, I walked back towards where I'd left my friends. We met halfway between their apartment and the corner store, and they grabbed my hands in fear, asking, "Who's following you?" And just then, he passed by, pretending to walk past us and go down a street in the direction they'd come from, as if he were just casually out for a stroll. He'd clearly followed me back, and when he saw my friends, pretended to be minding his own business and gave up. As soon as I saw him, I felt like I was about to faint, and my friends must have seen the look on my face because they immediately knew it was him. Each of them took one of my arms, and they hurriedly walked me the whole way back to my apartment, glancing over their shoulders to make sure we weren't being followed. Thankfully, he really did seem to have given up. One of my friends called my host mother and told her the situation, and my host mother had her 2 eldest children leave the event they were attending to keep me company and keep a lookout on the apartment. I couldn't stop shaking. I was certain every time I looked out the window that I'd see the man wandering around outside the apartment complex. Soon after that, my friends invited me to stay at their apartment instead, since it was by the more well-lit and busier market area. And just in case the man had actually located my first host family's apartment complex. Thankfully, I didn't see the scarred man again that summer. But as I said before, I spent 2 summers in that city. This was only the first. The second summer I was there, I worked in a different primary school, but it was on the other side of the same neighborhood, right next to a hotel. I stayed with a new host family for the first half of my summer, and then, because of some long, convoluted reasons I won't go into here, I stayed in a hotel for the second half, which was pretty convenient because all I had to do to get to the primary school was walk out the back door of the hotel and across the big parking lot. That, and the hotel had cable, with English language stations, and free internet, which my host family didn't have. I was pretty happy with the situation, even if it meant living on my own and paying a little extra. One night, towards the end of my time tutoring at that school, I was out late again, doing a little shopping for little gifts to bring home for my friends. I hadn't had as many creepy interactions this summer, and I had dismissed the previous summer's weirdness as an unusual incident and put it almost totally out of my mind. After a nice evening out, I walked home. The hotel had a back entrance, as I've said before, facing the primary school, and opening out into a large parking lot. The front entrance of the hotel was facing a highway, Since the back entrance was closer to the shopping area than the front entrance, I generally used the back entrance to go in and out. That night, as usual, I headed up the road leading to the hotel's back entrance and began to cross the parking lot towards that bright rectangle of light. And that's when I saw him. Standing between me and the steps to the hotel entrance, right in the middle of the parking lot, was a tall figure of a man. I squinted, taking a few steps closer, then froze. In the light from the hotel, I could see a shaved head and a half-scarred face. I felt my blood run cold as recognition from the year before hit me, and at the same time, my heart started pounding through my chest. I clutched my purse tightly, ready to run. "Do you remember me?" he said, smiling that same predatory smile, the light barely illuminating his eyes. Stunned, I nodded and rasped out a yes. "I've missed you," he said. "Do you want to go out sometime and get dinner?" I glanced between him and the door. If I said no, would he let me pass? Could I make it inside in time if I ran for it? There was no way to hide where I was heading now. It was obvious that I was staying in the hotel. All I could hope was to get inside and deadbolt my room's door. After a moment of consideration, I nodded, trying to look confident. "Sure, okay," I lied. I definitely had no intention of going to get dinner, drinks, or anything else with this guy. "Can I have your phone number? I really want to get to know you." "I'm sure we'll run into each other again soon," I assured him, my voice shaking as I edged, keeping as much distance between him and me as possible. The outer part of the parking lot and towards my salvation, that bright warm door. "I'm sure we will," he said with a knowing smile, then told me his name and asked for mine. I don't remember his name now. I was too frightened to concentrate on that. It was Carl, or something similar. I lied again, giving him a false name, all while edging towards the door, my eyes never leaving him. As soon as I was at the hotel steps, I bolted. I ran inside to the front concierge's desk, continuously glancing behind me. In broken Chinese, the workers at this hotel didn't know much English. I described the man to them, and told them that he was following me, and asked them to please not reveal my room number to him. Concerned, and more than a little confused, they agreed, and told me that they'd let me know if he came asking around about me. I thanked them and rushed to the elevator door. I didn't even feel remotely safe until I was locked and deadbolted in my little hotel room. I laid down on my bed in shock, shaking and crying a little. I still have no idea if he was staying in the hotel and if we ran into each other by chance, or if he had seen me and figured out where I was staying and decided to wait for me. Thankfully, I only had a week left at that school before it was time to pack up and go back to America. Unfortunately, there was no way of getting to the primary school without walking through, or at least passing by the parking lot, so every time I passed through, I would look around in terror. I'm glad to say I never saw the scarred man again, and I haven't been back to China since. Not because of him, but just because adult life got in the way, as it always does. If I ever do go back, I'm still not sure I want to return to that same suburb. Hopefully, I can convince my tutoring agency to send me somewhere else. Sometimes I wonder if I was overacting during those 2 summers. Maybe the man just happened to be in the same location I was. Maybe he wasn't following me at all. But then I remember that predatory smile, and the coldness in his eyes, as he said he wanted to get to know me. And I know that whatever was going through his head was not pretty at all. Being a young woman, all alone in a foreign country, I'm sure you can understand how frightening that kind of situation would be. Anyway, creepy scarred man, if I return to China, let's not meet. Or anywhere else for that matter.
Number 2.
I'm basically brand new to this subreddit, but I've read a few stories, and one in particular reminded me of the most terrifying thing that I've ever experienced, but luckily avoided. I'll start with a little backstory. Growing up, I had a lot of fun experiences with sneaking out of the house. My house was 3 floors, a finished basement, a middle floor, and the top floor, where all the bedrooms were. When I had friends over, we all slept in the finished basement. It was a mutual agreement between my parents and I. They got to sleep without hearing a peep, and we got to be as loud as we wanted. The best part about the basement was the fact that it had a sliding door to go in and out of. Now, anyone with sliding doors knows that most of them are completely silent when opening and closing. This led to at least 50+ instances between the ages of 13 and 16, before we could drive, where a group of friends and I would sneak out and go meet up with girls who lived further down the road. Notice how I said my friends and I? Up until this point, I had never snuck out on my own. It wasn't from fear of sneaking out on my own. It was just prearranged that when the girls down the street would have a sleepover, the boys would have a sleepover at my house. There wasn't ever a reason for me to go out alone. However, I was talking to this one girl who lived a little further down the road, and she wanted me to come over and hang out, as teenagers do. So, unconcerned, I headed out into the summer night around 1 a.m. The route to get to this girl's house was on the same route as the other house we would always go to, so I was familiar with my surroundings. It was a pretty active suburban neighborhood, so even at hours that late, you'd have cars driving around. As a teenager, you didn't particularly want to be seen walking on the side of the road that late. So if you heard a car coming or saw headlights, you would duck into the woods or dive into the nearest bushes you could find. It was a heavy wooded area, so this wasn't challenging. However, there is always this one nightmarish stretch of road where there is neither a lot of woods or houses on either side. And if you couldn't get through that part of the road before a car comes, you're fucked. My friends and I, being the nerds we are, named it Diagon Alley. Harry Potter fans will get it. Cut to me, happy as humanly possible, on my way to potentially get laid for the first time, walking through Diagon Alley, not paying attention at all. All of a sudden, a car comes approaching quickly, and I run and hide in the thin woods behind a group of trees that were hardly covering me at all. 99% of the time, cars just go zooming by, either not seeing you, or seeing you but not caring enough to do anything about it. This car stopped in front of the house that was across the street from me. Not totally out of the ordinary yet. Maybe they lived there. At this point, I didn't think they saw me yet. After sitting there for 15 to 30 seconds, the car drove by and took a left. The reason the direction the car turned matters is because Diagon Alley was part of a large circular neighborhood of houses. Where this car took a left would eventually loop him or her right back to my location. Knowing this and not wanting to be caught in the street, I stayed in my position. Sure enough, no more than a minute later, the car came back. This time when it parked, it shined its headlights directly at me. I stood there in complete fear, not knowing what to do. A minute passes with the headlights on me, and the car proceeds to turn left and go around the circle again. Now I'm thinking it's time to make my way out of the woods and get the fuck out of there. But as I'm on the edge of the woods, about to hit the road, I hear the car coming again and duck back into the woods trying to find the best spot I can hide. This time, the car parks in the same spot as the first time it approached. The driver sat there for what felt like 10 to 15 minutes and I was frozen as ice. Paralyzed with fear, the engine turns off and I hear the car door open. This is where the frozen with fear thing subsides and the fight or flight mode sets in. I booked it out of the woods down the street as fast as I've ever run before. It almost felt inhuman. Instead of pursuing me on foot, the person, I didn't get a look at their face to confirm gender, hopped back in their car and tried to chase me that way. Luckily, I ran up and over a hill and immediately ducked into a driveway and rolled underneath a car that was parked there, a little out of eyeshot. The act of me going over the hill caused me to be out of sight long enough for the person to lose my position completely. For the driver, that wasn't the end though. They weren't satisfied. The car drove around the big circular road for 45 minutes, looking for me. Just going around and around and around very slowly. Finally, the car eventually disappeared. I waited an additional 15 to 20 minutes to make sure the car wasn't just trying to bait me to come out. And I took a completely different way back home. I only told my guy friends who used to sneak out with me about it. Never my parents. Never any of the girls. Nobody. My friends thought it could have been the police, but there is no way that's the case. They would have flicked the lights on and yelled at me that I was breaking the law, curfew, anything. Confirmation came when there was an abduction attempt no more than 2 weeks later in a neighborhood adjacent to mine. Who's to say what would have happened? I was a big kid at 16, 5'11", so maybe, if he or she did get a hold of me, I could have fended them off. I'm glad it never had to get to that point. Needless to say, I avoided Diagon Alley like the plague for at least a few months. Number 3. This isn't an encounter that happened to me. It happened to my mum. I'm sick, and I have been for a while, and it makes me feel weak to read or watch things for extended periods of time. So although I've never been on this subreddit until now, I spend about 7 hours a day listening to narrations of creepy or horror stories that are often taken from here on YouTube. For a bit of backstory, I'm a 22-year-old female, and I live with my mother in a small village in England. My mum is a Christian priest of 4 rural churches. She often has to visit sick and dying people to offer last rites, spiritual guidance, or sometimes just even company. People in a terminal situation at the benefice will often request to be seen by her, and she is obliged to go visit them. A couple of months ago, my mum went off to do a visitation. It was pretty much the usual. She'd sit with me for a little while. We would chat. She would flippantly sigh and say she was tired and didn't really want to go, but then leave me on the sofa with the dog while she was out. This time was a little different though. Instead of telling me that she was tired and didn't want to go, she looked quite upset and told me she had a bad feeling about going. She hadn't met the guy before, by the way. She just said she felt like he was going to be weird. Even though I'm a vicar's daughter, I'm not religious, and I don't really believe in premonition or things like that. So I brushed it off, told her not to be silly, and it'd be alright. So with a small forced smile and a gulp, she stood up to leave and kissed me goodbye. When she returned a couple of hours later, she was visibly pale and looking a little shaken, so I immediately arose to a sitting position and asked what's up. She began with, "That man scared me. He was horrible." I replied with a small laugh. "I thought he was dying. Why? What did he do?" I thought it was funny because how can a dying person be scary and horrible to a priest? I was also confused because he had specifically requested she go visit him. She told me that when she had gone to the hospice, she had been met with a typical image of a frail old man, unshaven, and hair greasy and long, looking incredibly weak. The conversation had started fairly normally. However, she said he came across a bit like a misogynistic, belligerent old man. She comes across a lot of these types, because in the church it is fairly new to be able to be a female priest, so this attitude is nothing new to her, but in her mind confirmed her fears that this was going to be a bit of a bumpy ride. He began insulting her a little bit in conversation, insinuating that she had misunderstood him over petty things, and getting very cross about that. Then he would rudely ask her things like, "Well, aren't you going to pray for me then?" Practically spitting the words out. It's hard to describe exactly what transpired to make her feel uncomfortable. It was just his general lack of respect and demeanor. He would simultaneously be insulting, but extremely needy, asking her to sit closer to the bed, and hold his hand, and things like that. All the while, he was wired to many various tubes and machines. My mother noticed that hanging out of the bed was a tube that she recognized as being linked up to him that allowed him to urinate without getting up. Well, they were praying, and suddenly mid-prayer he gave her what she described, a look of evil. He then twisted his face into a disgusting grin, exposing his gnarly yellow and brown-stained teeth. He gripped her hand even tighter and said in a deep, raspy, hushed voice, never breaking eye contact, "Do you know what I'm doing right now?" My mother lurched to her feet and turned to walk out of the room. "Wait! What are you doing?" he said, a look of panic and anger washing over his face. With her insides churning, my mother kept her tone level and said, "I know exactly what you are doing, and I don't think it's appropriate to do that with a female in the room, do you?" She then turned to walk out of the room. "Don't go! Come back here! Now!" he screeched. Well, about as loud as a dying 90-year-old man could muster. My mother said, "Are you done?" And he responded with a small yes. So she came back in, and he kept being strange for the rest of the visit, trying to make creepy advances, and yet berating her and criticizing her at the same time. She couldn't put her finger on what it quite was about him that had her so worked up, other than the weird piss incident. She said he just made her extremely uncomfortable, and his volatile behavior, flipping between extremely clingy and then totally angry, was very unsettling to say the least. When the visit came to an end, he begged my mum not to leave and practically screamed the place down, shouting that she was just leaving him to die, and that he would see her in hell. The man was obviously troubled mentally, perhaps partially senile, but his behavior really shook up my mum. And to be honest, when she recounted what happened, it sent shivers down my spine. As I already said, I don't believe in God, or things like that. But when your own mother, who you love, looks into your eyes with tears in her own and tells you that she felt like she encountered a piece of the devil himself, it's pretty unsettling. It took a while to calm her down from this situation. When he requested another visit a week later, unsurprisingly, she asked the local retired priest to fill in. "So creepy, clingy, pissy old dude? Let's not meet." Hey guys, Mingo Creeper here. Thank you for checking out my video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you have, get your friends to subscribe. And if they have, get your pets to subscribe. I post every Monday and Wednesday, sometimes Thursday if I'm forgetful. But if you are impatient, I do have older videos you can check out if you haven't already seen them. I would like to thank the Reddit users who gave me permission to share their stories with you. The links to the original stories are in the description. If you want to send me your creepy stories to reach this beautiful creepy community, you can either email them to me or message me over Facebook. Details for both are in the description. Just be sure to include a brief statement saying I do have your permission and let me know whether or not it's a Monday story or a Wednesday story. If you haven't already, go like my Facebook page, as I post daily about various things ranging from haunted objects to urban legends. As always, my creepers, be safe, and remember, the monster isn't under your bed, it's in the street.